Welcome to Engagement Fundraising, where you'll learn how busy fundraisers like you are generating more major and planned gifts at lower costs. Brought to you by iMarketSmart.com. Be the fundraiser you always wanted to be. A quick announcement. As a listener of the podcast, we are making the Engagement Fundraising audiobook available to you free of charge. Just go to iMarketSmart.com/exclusive-podcast-offer. As a thank you for listening, we wanted to give everyone free access to Greg's Engagement Fundraising audiobook that you can get on Audible or Apple Books for $15. Once again, just visit iMarketSmart.com/exclusive-podcast-offer. That's iMarketSmart.com/exclusive-podcast-offer. Thanks for listening to the podcast, and we hope you enjoy Greg's book. Now, on to the episode.
Tim!
Hey, Greg. How's it going?
It's super duper. You know why it's super duper?
So we have a super duper guest.
Yeah, it's a mystery guest, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, last time it was Bono.
It's always Bono.
It's always Bono is our mystery guest. All right, today it's Bill Gates.
Ooh.
Holy cow,
wow.
Bill Gates
Foundation.
Solving malaria
Wow, yeah.
and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And he said, you know what was really cool about this interview that with Bill Gates is that, like, I was in a board meeting and the board said, well, why don't we just ask Bill Gates for money? And I was like, you know what? That's a fabulous idea. I'll get him on my podcast and ask him for money.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, not. None of this is true.
No.
We don't have Bill Gates on there. Instead, we have Jason Lewis.
Yeah.
Hi, Jason.
Hi.
Author of The War for Fundraising Talent and How Small Shops Can Win. Also, I guess I would say another disruptor in the space. Maybe he's a pissed off donor like me. I don't know if you would describe yourself that way. How do you describe yourself, Jason?
The way I describe myself, I'm sort of backing off the term, but on the back of the book, I describe myself as a contrarian. I feel like the nonprofit space needs some of that, some sort of pushback on some of the long-held assumptions as to how fundraising really works. So that's kind of the word, but a generous and sincere one. I mean, I'm not a contrarian because I don't believe in everything that all these organizations are trying to accomplish. I think it's because we have to ask ourselves some hard questions.
Yeah, we're both trying to just kind of poke and prod and get people to think about things a little bit differently. People don't really know what their job is. And like, you know, you and I were both commenting on something recently over the weekend where somebody posted these amazing results. If you do X or do Y, you'll get a second gift and you'll increase retention and you'll increase lifetime value and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, oh boy, promoting this is really just going to inspire more fundraisers to just pound the crap out of donors. Too many people get into it and they think that that's okay, especially since they don't have to meet any of these people that they're pounding. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you sort of started and ended that comment there on the right word. It's that word think. I think that we've got this younger generation of fundraising professionals, this new generation that doesn't have loyalties to PR and marketing, but is deliberately coming into the field, thinking about this chosen profession, what we call fundraising. And they're thinking, okay, is this really how this works? If you're in marketing, if you're in PR, if you're in any of those spaces, they're in the midst of some upheaval as well.
Yeah, and I call it fundraising climate change. I saw what happened in England. I won't go into the story, but, you know, this lady getting pelted with thousands of solicitations every year. And then she was depressed and old, but she killed herself. And then GDPR comes in Europe and all these protections. It's like this rolling thunderstorm coming to us. And the donors are just not going to have it anymore. They're not interested in being pelted and pummeled. And this is where I was going a minute ago, is that the leadership in a lot of ways is to blame. Because if it's not working, they're just like, send out more and pummel them more and spam them. I say you can't spam or junk mail your way into somebody's estate plan. You just can't. That's not how it works. But leadership, unfortunately, too often doesn't really understand the steps, the consideration process on the donor's end. And they only focus on the steps that they or their staff need to do. And without the other side of the coin, the donor's perspective and their consideration process being taken into account, you're not going to make it. And the climate is changing. In fact, a lot of people are telling me, and tell me if you agree, this past end of year, all I heard was everybody was down like anywhere from 10 to 15 to 20%, especially among their digital channels. What have you been hearing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm basically hearing the same thing. So at the same time that we're making that sort of reality check on how year-end giving worked was that first time where I started seeing some real heavy critique on the whole Giving Tuesday sort of phenomenon. You're starting to see people sort of question our judgment on how basically year-end giving, from the point at which we carry out Giving Tuesday to whatever our, last minute crisis appeals are on December 31st, I think you're seeing sort of let's look back on what we're doing and our patterns and habits and stuff. We have for so long convinced the people in the fundraising profession that more donors is sort of the way to solve this. But I think we've got a young person, a young, rising fundraiser who's gotten a little wise to that, and they're not buying it. And so if you're just saying more and more and more, they know things coming right in from day one that it took us a decade to learn.
Yeah, in this downturn, though, the organization is actually getting less out of more in terms of less revenue, but they're doing more junk mail, more telemarketing, more events, more this, more that. I believe that they do need to do more, but they're doing the wrong more. They need to provide more value to the donor.
Totally.
And this is something that, when I say this to some people, their eyes just, glaze over and they're just like, what do you mean more value? What does that mean? And then I'm like, oh, now I know you totally don't get it. You really don't get it. You think fundraising is all about soliciting and pressing that button, sending out more emails. It's all about providing value to these real human beings that are at the other end of that communication and thinking about what value are you providing. And if you glaze over in that comment, when I say that, if you don't understand that at its core, you're in the wrong job. What do you think of that?
Yeah, but I think they've been in the wrong job for decades. I think I think you're talking about two distinctively different generations of fundraising professionals. I think you have a generation of fundraising professionals who've been in their jobs and the gurus and experts that those people are listening to.
Yeah.
I think you've got a generation of people that have convinced themselves and been loyal followers of the idea that fundraising can be done at an arm's length, that it can be done in a mass market approach, and that it'll work just fine. And that approach is falling apart. That glazing over that you're describing is a person who doesn't want to take somebody out to lunch after they get that first gift.
Yeah, that's very true. These are people who probably can't relate to a wealthy major donor prospect. And they kind of know it. They're a little bit afraid.
I don't think it's a wealthy donor. I think it's any donor. I don't make the distinction anymore. I don't use the mega donor, major donor sort of language. I think if we thought about it, all of us know what that initial, oftentimes relatively trivial gift is that we give to an organization the first time. And we also know an organization that subsequently we gave a much more meaningful gift to that oftentimes is 5 times as much. In order to get between that $100 that I gave you that first time on Giving Tuesday and that $500 that I could give to you if you take me out for a cup of coffee, I think it's going to be a current reality.
Yeah, but how do you look with limited resources and only maybe one fundraiser on staff, maybe 3, maybe 5? It's not worthwhile for them to go out to coffee with everybody or even most people who don't have the capacity or potential to make major impact. I mean, like my company, we don't even send salespeople anywhere, frankly, and we wait until we've qualified people to a certain degree before we try to engage with them. Certainly, if we're going to send someone face to face, they better be highly qualified because it's just not profitable. So help me with that.
Yeah, I'm talking about essentially the difference between, the efficiency that comes with even this conversation here. You and I are not in the same room. We didn't have to travel I only had to travel from my from my bedroom to my kitchen to get a cup of coffee and log on to my computer. I'm talking about the expectation between that initial and whatever subsequent gift you have of your donors is going to require more. You're calling it value. I call it meaningful engagement. I can take a 28-year-old who's got some, self-awareness and some good communication skills, and in 6 months I can have them perfectly capable of sitting in the living room of Olive Cook and having a cup of tea for an hour. Let's not exaggerate what it takes to do that.
Well, that's not good business for the charity, just frankly speaking. I would drop a charity if I heard that they were going to take a 25-year-old out to lunch to get a second gift of $25.
It's not $25 though. I think I'm not talking about $25. I'm talking about it's not the amount of money, Greg. It's not the amount of money at all. It's the movement. It's the maturing of that relationship. It's understanding the difference between that initial and that subsequent gift. And once you've gotten that first gift, the relationship is effectively changed, and therefore the expectation of that relationship has changed.
Well, what we've learned here is that you can provide massive amounts of value that is highly personalized and exponentially related to what the donor wants and needs and desires.
Sure.
Through technology. You don't have to meet with them and take them out. In fact, what we see in our data in our dashboard is that most supporters actually don't want to meet you for coffee, not yet. They want to build trust. They want to see that you're providing them with value and meaningful engagements at a certain arm's length because they're not ready for that face-to-face meeting either. Bam, poo, pow.
I totally get that. I mean, technology does enable us to do that. I'm not advocating for the organization. I'm advocating for the fundraising professional. I think where fundraisers are today, I think a lot of people who've been in the field for years, if not decades, is they've never developed those muscles and that confidence to be at the lunch table. If we keep allowing ourselves to utilize whatever highly efficient means there are, we never develop that confidence to be at the lunch table.
So in your book, and the title is The War for Fundraising Talent, tell me about this war.
It's not like who gets to hire Tim or Greg or Jason. It's not the traditional talent war that I'm talking about. I'm actually talking about an ideological war between two different types of organizations. One organization assumes that the constant accumulation of new donors is the way to raise more money, and the other organization assumes that the donors you have are always the donors that are better to have. You want to constantly be raising the expectation of those relationships that already exist. And so you got these two competing sort of worldviews, if you will, in the nonprofit sector. That you got these fundraising professionals that have no idea that these two competing worldviews exist, and they're working for both of these organizations. The average fundraiser 2 or 3 years in hasn't figured this out to the point where they realize that if I go work for that first organization, they're not going, and I'm going to be basically responsible for always acquiring new donors, through whatever means they want me to do that. I'm never going to generate an adequate margin to even justify myself on the payroll.
Yeah, we look at it when we talk to customers, we always tell them that if they're going to even consider working with us, they've got to understand that the whole reason why you acquire new donors is to eventually help them become major donors and legacy donors. The whole purpose of acquiring them isn't just to retain them and to get monthly giving. You can't make money that way. It's not profitable. It's just not.
It's not. Yeah. And that's kind of like that little bantering that we were doing on social media, you and I with some other folks this weekend. If you and I both went back and we sort of read through that thread of conversation, you'll remember we have made these sort of generalizations that we make about who these donors are. I think the term that the gentleman used was, it was this idea of sort of the monthly donor, it was some distinction other than the major donor. My thought was, as I was reading through that, I thought, does this donor know that that's the description they've got, and that's sort of the expectation that they're living up to, is to basically behave in this particular way? Most organizations are looking at their donors and they see two data points. They see basically the size of any number of gifts and the dates on which they gave.
Well, that's not our customers.
Right. I'm not right. I don't. Yeah, I'm not suggesting that they are.
That's the old way.
Yeah, but that doesn't tell you anything. I mean, how many of us in this world today want to be known by those two data points. That doesn't say anything about me.
Yeah, well, and that's why the world has got to change. I mean, if you're only looking at those two data points, you're off the grid already. I think that's what was upsetting me about that conversation on social media, where the guy was basically talking about retention rates. And look, if you can just get them to make a second gift, then their lifetime value. Well, that's not really true. You can't just pummel people to get them to make a second gift, because then magically they'll end up having a higher lifetime value. The truth is that what you need to do is that when they make that first gift, you should interview them well, of course, I'm promoting my own stuff, but you should ask them to take a survey so that you can allow them to self-qualify, and you've got to monitor their digital body language so that you understand their interests as they self-navigate the consideration process over time. So instead of just looking at who they are and how much they gave and calling them a certain donor, now they are describing who they are through the survey and what their interests are through their own digital body language. And then we get a fuller picture of understanding them so that we can relate to them in a way that provides them with value. Pooh! What do you think of that?
Yeah, I totally. You and I should go on a road show. I mean, we're basically saying the same thing.
The only thing is I don't go to events. As a general rule, I do not go to fundraising conferences, events, workshops, any of that.
I was at the big international conference in New Orleans this time last year. It really troubled me. But when you have an industry that's basically driven by technology companies that assume that the only way to make money is to accumulate more and more donors, you're in trouble.
I never will be in that room. The reason is because there's so much misinformation and too many charlatans at those events. Number one, I don't want to be a part of them because they're propagating that the sector really shouldn't be hearing, number one, and that has nothing to do with being kind and delivering value to donors. So I don't want to even be around it. Number two, though, this is exponentially more important of why, is because we practice what we preach. We're in the qualification and prioritization and cultivation business of relationships, cultivating relationships. So if we're in the qualification and prioritization, cultivation relationship business, why on earth would I go to what is exactly opposite of our philosophy, which is to go to a conference, sit at a booth, or walk around hoping to bump into somebody who's qualified and interested and ready to consider buying from us? I'm not going to bump into them. The likelihood that I bump into somebody like that at a conference or that they come by my booth is very, very, very unlikely. So what I do instead, and what this company does, is we practice what we preach. We give value to people, mostly on the internet, give as much value, and then even more value until they finally start to self-navigate the consideration process and they opt in, they self-identify, they self-qualify, they start filling out forms on our site, just like we recommend our customers have their donors do. And then we monitor their engagement over time, their digital body language, more forms, more verbatims, more surveys, and then they begin to move from awareness to interest and interest to desire, where they finally click that button on the top right-hand corner that says get a demo. And then they're like, all right, I'm ready to talk to you. And this, by the way, everything I just said is unbelievably economical. It's exponentially less costly for me from a marketing perspective, and I'm on top of the numbers, than any other way. I could do junk mail. I could do spam and upset people. I could go to these conferences and buy the booths and fly around, but it doesn't work, and it's too expensive. Now, the other side of the coin is that our system does the same exact thing for the fundraiser and for the donor. And it helps people, the wonderful, qualified major or legacy donor prospect, or even a mid-level, gives them an opportunity to lean in so that they can meet the fundraiser when they're ready, rather than the other way around. Whew! So that's why I don't go to conferences, is because I'm practicing what I preach. I'm eating my own dog food.
This episode is brought to you by us here at MarketSmart and Engagement Fundraising by Greg Warner. In this quick break, I want to remind everyone to go to imarketsmart.com/exclusive-podcast-offer to download the Engagement Fundraising audiobook for free. This offer is only available to listeners of the podcast. It's our way of saying thank you for listening, and we really hope you enjoy the book. Once again, go to imarketsmart.com/exclusive-podcast-offer to take advantage of this promotion, available only to listeners of the podcast. Now, back to the episode.
People don't want to change. I mean, that's human nature. People don't want to change. It's just that fundraising climate change is coming. If they don't change, then, the donors will dictate the change for them. I think, honestly, also, I think a lot of the people that go to conferences, unfortunately, I think it's because they're networking. I'd say 50% of it at least is networking so that they are sure to be able to have another job if something goes wrong at the current employer. What the conference is supposed to do for a vendor is it's supposed to give us an opportunity to meet with people and to generate revenue, highly profitable revenue. But it doesn't. It doesn't. It's very expensive and it doesn't work.
I think people want to go to these conferences to generate value for them, and it's not. I think they want to go and create and form meaningful engagement, and I don't think it is. And that's the same thing that you and I are saying to our fundraisers, and we're saying that our donors want, and we're faking it. Just like that dialogue that was happening on social media this weekend. There's a lot of definitions of value that we in the fundraising space have so rationalized our donors as defining that way. So we assume what we're doing is actually valuable to our donors, and it's not valuable at all.
Here's number one, thank you calls.
That's what I mean by meaningful engagement. That was my response to that thread. I said, hey, why don't you factor in the fact that somebody might have picked up the phone and said thank you to that first gift? So they actually had a live conversation with somebody. That actually might be what's playing in there. But to put all the emphasis on just getting the subsequent gift, it's just on the transaction, not on the fact that that there's other value, that there's something else of meaning and value.
Okay,
there.
so we actually missed each other because I was actually knocking thank you calls.
Yeah.
So here's my problem with quote unquote thank you calls. So most donors don't really want to be thanked. That's not the greatest value to them, is just getting thanked. It is nice. I'm not knocking it entirely. It is nice to be thanked, but they'd rather get some kind of, like you were saying, meaningful engagement. So they would rather be provided not only with the thank you, but with an opportunity to engage in a deeper level, an opportunity to learn about a new widget that shows where clean water is being created, or a new calculator that shows exactly how many sandwiches their donations create, or an annual report, or a webinar with their CEO. Being offered something of value is exponentially greater than just a thank you call. And this is what I worry about in the sector, is that I hear this misinformation, especially at conferences. Well, you've got to thank your donors. You got to thank your donors. Thank your donors. Well, then it becomes a mechanized operation. Okay, we have to thank our donors. Okay, I'm going to call the donor and I'm going to say, hi, I'm just calling to say thank you. Okay, and that's the end. And then they expect the donor to have some kind of meaningful conversation with them. There's no value being offered to the donor. Poof.
But listen.
There. Getting mad, man.
Greg, listen. We gotta have some. What's the word? I'm lost for words.
Empathy.
Yeah, we gotta have empathy. Right. You
Empathy
gotta have
for
some
who?
empathy.
The donor or the fundraiser?
The fundraiser. You're in that seminar.
Yeah.
And I've never even thought about it this way, but
Which seminar am I in? Because I don't go to them.
You're
Which one? At a
You're
conference?
Think
Let's
about
imagine
it for a minute.
that I go to a conference and there's
You're in that seminar.
Yeah, in that
You're
seminar.
in that
Okay.
seminar.
The imaginary
You're hearing-
seminar that I won't go to. But yeah, tell me about it. What's it like?
You're in that seminar, and this self-proclaimed guru is at the front of the room saying you have to say thank you, thank you, thank you, right?
Yeah. And then I throw up, but then I come back and then I say,
And we all heard it. We all heard it.
I heard it. Yep.
We all heard it. For anybody who's been in fundraising, we all heard that you had to say thank you like 7 or 10 times.
Plus, they never tell anybody how to say thank you. By the way, just saying, which sucks.
Let me get my thought out.
All right,
Hold
get
on.
your thought out.
Okay. The thank you call after the first gift, right?
Mm-hmm.
After I gave you $100 on Giving Tuesday.
Yeah.
Thank you call is really important, and it's probably a very powerful tool right then and there at that particular place. It's like the first date. Doesn't necessarily require a whole lot to score some additional points at the point at which the relationship has just been the exchange of $100.
So you're recommending that your clients call or email or both every donor that makes an initial gift and say thank you?
Yes.
And can they afford to do that? How do they do that economically? Like, what staff member does that?
I get it. You're pushing back, Greg, on the problem that is mass acquisition. The problem with Giving Tuesday is that it creates such a volume that it raises the question that you're asking, which is to say, I can't make that many calls. What we need to be doing, Greg, is instead of asking the question, oh my, we can't afford to do that, maybe we need to think about the way in which we created that volume. You spread out all those gifts, Greg, over a period of time, and making those thank you calls is not nearly as costly and not nearly as impossible a task.
So you recommend that organizations spread out their solicitations so that it's easier for them to make the thank you calls?
Absolutely. It's a volume problem. There are limits on any enterprise to the point at which you get to diminishing returns and negative returns and you're losing money. You don't want more customers coming through your door than you can convert.
Yeah, no, this isn't how our business works. I wouldn't recommend that they space things out. Everything about marketing and the way we work and the way that we recommend our clients work is a matter of qualification and prioritization. Therefore, if you get an onslaught of interest and you're doing it right, you should be qualifying. There's no way that every single one of them will be exactly the same level of interest and qualification and readiness to take action. So there's always a prioritization. The reason that fundraisers don't know how to make these calls and fail to make them because nobody ever taught them how to make these calls. So I'm going to give you real quick about how they should make the calls, is that they shouldn't call and say, I'm just calling to say thank you for your $100,000. That's not the way to do it. And they shouldn't even say it without that voice. They shouldn't say it like, hi, I'm calling from XYZ organization and I'm just calling to say thank you for your gift. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. No. What they should do is they should call and offer some kind of value. They should say, hi, Mrs. Williams, this is Greg. I'm calling from XYZ organization, and I wanted to thank you so much for that recent donation and also offer you an opportunity to engage with our CEO in a webinar. Don't worry, you don't have to talk to him or anything, but you would be able to see him as he's installing the well that will generate water for the village in XYZ. So I'd like to invite you to that. Would you like me to email you that invitation so that you could see this? This is for an exclusive group. So providing value, providing some kind of offer that's meaningful, especially because you just saw in the survey that that's all she wanted. She said in the survey after she gave the donation, all she wanted was to participate in a webinar with the CEO. That's what she wanted. She said it after she gave. Now we're engaging. Forget whether you say thank you or not. That's nice, but that's just like a piece of it. That's a tiny piece of it. What people really want is value and meaningful engagement. And that meaningful engagement would be to watch the CEO install the damn well that they paid for. Drop the mic.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Engage in Fundraising. If you like the show, make sure to review it on iTunes and pass it along to a colleague. I also wanted to remind everyone to visit imarketsmart.com/exclusive-podcast-offer to download the Engagement Fundraising audiobook for free. Once again, that's imarketsmart.com/exclusive-podcast-offer.
Thanks again for listening to this episode of Engagement Fundraising.